Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY, and today's episode, we're getting out in the car and we are actually going for a drive for the first time in almost a year. So, stay tuned for that. All right, everybody, it is finally time to take this Mini, this turbocharged Mini, and hit the road. But in order to get it out on the road, we need to do some stuff to make sure it's safe and to make sure everything is going to be working properly while I'm out on the road, running it in and getting an idea of how this turbocharger feels. Now, before we get started, I want to mention, don't forget that we have a turbocharged kit giveaway that's happening right now on Classic Mini DIY's merch store. For every $5 spent, you get one entry in to win a complete turbocharger kit. That is a turbocharger, an exhaust manifold and downpipe, and plenum, a blow-off valve, and some really cool ancillary bits that are going to help you get started on a turbocharged journey. It's not everything you need, but it's a lot of what you need. So, if you're interested in entering that, head over to the link in my description, store.classicminidiy.com. Now, before we get started and before we actually get out in the car, what we need to do is one of my most important tasks, and it's actually a group of tasks, and I like to call it, what the f is that noise? And this part of the build process and starting your car for the first time and going for a drive is arguably one of, if not the most important step. And that is going over everything on the car to make sure it's not loose, to make sure you didn't forget some bolts, leave a wrench inside the engine bay, all that kind of stuff. Now, for those of you with a keen eye, you might notice that this valve cover is slightly different, and that is because it is a different valve cover. Now, I had a custom breather system that I was running to a PCV collector that was actually on my exhaust. It's something that some more modern cars have adopted, sucking in the positive crankcase ventilation and putting it right into the exhaust. It keeps the exhaust out of your intake system, therefore preventing any sort of oil or kind of muddying of the mixture. But unfortunately, that experiment didn't work quite as well as I'd hoped, which was always a possibility. What I did is I had a spare valve cover and I ran a breather from my transfer case over here and a breather from my timing case, which you can't see too well, onto welded AN bungs, and then I have one exit out into an oil catch can in my fender. Now, I ran this and I tested it out a little bit, and you might be able to see there's a little bit of residual oil around the lip here, and I think that these are leaking just a little bit, which I have to admit is not terribly surprising because I am a terrible welder. Now, I need to take this off and I need to fix those, and then I'll need to repaint it a little bit. So I'm gonna pop this off and then I'll show you guys what it looks like on the bench and show you how I'm fixing it. All right, so let's have a little bit closer look at this. Now, the way that I welded on these bungs, one, I am not a welder. I have no skill as a welder. I understand the concepts, but I'm not very good at all. And as a result, in this case, it meant that my breather system where I welded these on seemed to leak a little bit. Now, I basically just cut holes or, drilled holes that fit the weld-on AN bungs. I got some basic steel ones, look just like this, nothing complicated. And then I set those in on the valve cover here and then welded them in from the back. That way the front would look and the outside would look quite nice while the inside got all the boogery stuff. Now, it looks to me like I'm leaking a little bit around this one, which is a little bit lower profile, so that one might need a little bit of touch up. And then I think I'm leaking around the bottom of this one here. And then the oil is getting down here and ultimately, starting to kind of collect. So as a result, I'm gonna have to re-weld this, which is unfortunately going to mess up this finish a little bit, but this was always kind of a temporary finish because the undercoat, what was on the valve cover when I got it, was this kind of nasty line here. I think it actually came from the factory like this, And as a result, it looks quite ugly. And I don't have all my plates for it. So short term, I wanted to get my car running. Long term, this is definitely going to get powder coated to look more like my actual valve cover, which was powder coated. And it's this one right here. You can see the finish is just much nicer. And I want Morris to live on top of there. Anyways, let's cut to a montage because I'm not going to teach you guys how to weld. You don't want me to. And then you guys can kind of see how I'm doing this, how I'm cleaning it up, and then hopefully no more leaking. All right, so we have this valve cover back in place. The seal is nice and tight, and I think I've solved all the leaks on these breathers here. Won't know for sure until we get it out on the road and see how it drives and see how much oil is potentially on the backside here. That said, it is time to go for a drive. Now, one thing I want to mention here is that this filter might be, you might notice that that's something a little bit different. Right now, I am running a smaller motorcycle style filter here using a Specialist Components like adapter plate. The K&N filter, I thought it fit in here. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit quite so well. My goal, though, is to take this filter off, which is not large enough based on what I've read and what my peers have told me. I'll be taking this filter off, I'll be taking this adapter plate off, and I'll be moving to a Ram style Ram air filter that's a little like, it's got a stainless steel frame in it, but it's one of those foam filters, and I'm hoping that it fits and kind of compresses a little bit in this engine bay so the round nose Mini here can fit the filter underneath. I think that most people wouldn't have this issue if they had a genuine Garrett turbocharger. The exhaust manifold on this one is just a little bit larger, and so it puts the turbo farther forward. But obviously it does fit in here. It's just a little bit more work. So anyways, new filter. That might limit us a little bit. And then this is my little atomic boost controller down here. This is what we tighten or loosen in order to increase or decrease the boost. Actually, I think it might be the opposite of that. I think you loosen it to increase the boost. Unimportant. Anyways, let's get this out on the road. I'm going to warm it up, and then I'm going to meet you guys out on the road and, see what this is like to drive. All right, getting started, we have hit the road in the Mini, and I am just driving down here in a regular area of my town, and I want you guys to hear, this is the first pull I did on the Mini after the turbo build. I'm at about 8 PSI, and I think it's going to give you guys a really great opportunity to hear the blow-off valve, as well as the kind of look and feel and how it sounds as you start to accelerate in a turbocharged car. So, without further ado, enjoy. Now keep an eye on the boost gauge in this next segment. This is going to show you guys what's happening as I move through the gears up to my full boost potential, which is about 8 to 10 PSI here. noticed that the AFR gauge here is getting a little too lean, especially in boost, and that's actually why I'm not pushing this all the way past to 12 psi, which is what I've got it set to. I don't want my car to detonate, and so my goal here is to test it out, start seeing how my boost and my fueling is, and get that adjusted on the needle, which is my next step here, probably in my next video. Now for a little bit of fun, I want to share what the exhaust sounds like, and this is under acceleration and of course coming to a deceleration as well. For this last segment, let's just take a drive. I'll let you guys listen, see what it's like to drive this, and then we'll wrap it up and pull back into the garage here, and we can have kind of a debrief on how all of the driving went and how we're going to move forward. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up the first drive in this turbocharged Classic Mini. It is extremely fun to drive, but I'm sure you guys noticed that I wasn't putting the hammer down. I wasn't just beating the snot out of this car yet. And there are a few reasons that I haven't done that. Namely, when you're working with boost, it is very, very important, or at least it is more beneficial to you to take your time and really make sure that these things are working properly. Obviously, first off, starting off with very low boost, and then working your way up to a higher and higher PSI, while very, very attentively keeping an eye on your fueling and your ignition timing and all of those different things. Now I have the boost currently turned up to 12 PSI. I am, however, not capable of sustaining that boost metric because of a couple things, but the main reason is down to fueling. Now, for those of you who don't know or who haven't seen the videos prior to this one, this is a turbo SU carb, and this carb is made for a boosted engine, but it's made for a boosted engine running at a lower boost pressure. So as a result, this is gonna take some tweaking to get it working just the way we want it to. And right now I'm running the BDD needle in this carburetor with the regular dash pot oil and a 6 ounce, I believe it's a 6 ounce yellow HIF spring, carb spring that goes inside this damper here. And so I've done a little bit of reading and I've done some exploring and some learning. And I've also talked with my friend Turbo Phil over at turbomini.com. If you haven't seen his channel, definitely recommend checking that out. He has a YouTube channel. He covers all sorts of really cool things. And if you haven't seen it, head over there and subscribe. Really nice guy. But he has been helping me out. And he's made some suggestions. Since I am running over 10 PSI, I'm gonna be targeting about 12 to 15 PSI on this car. Recommended that I maybe check out the BCA needle. namely because it's a little bit richer in the top end. And the behavior I'm seeing right now is really very, very rich at idle and low end, low RPM. But once I start sending a bunch of boost through it and getting up closer to my target, 12 PSI, it's leaning out quite a bit. Now, if you look at my needle comparison chart on my website, you can actually see, and I'll pop it on the screen here, the BCA needle is a little bit richer at the top end, but mostly the same at the bottom. So my hope is that I can safely lean it out at the lower end, which I really want to do, and then make sure that it's still getting the fuel it needs at the upper end of that needle. If that doesn't work, I'm probably gonna have to profile the needle a little bit and experiment with the different springs, the different dash pot oils, those different things. This is the beauty of an A-series, or maybe it's the pain of an A-series, using a carburetor. There is some tuning and some fiddling and some tweaking that you have to do after you get everything started. It's never just like start it up and move on. Now, aside from that though, a quick assessment of the car is that it is insanely fast. It is incredibly powerful, very, very fun to drive. The temperatures of the engine seem to be nominal. It is very cold outside today, but I'm not seeing any overheating right now, which is good. My fixes to the rocker cover solved the leaks up here, so no more leaky on the breathers. And one other thing is the torque steer. Even with the ATB differential in here, the torque steer is pretty substantial. And if you aren't careful when you're pulling out of a corner or something like that, if you punch it, like taking a right turn, taking a left turn on a road, and you hit the gas too hard while you're taking that turn, it is going to fight you and it is going to really, really yank. So I think that part of that is simply the amount of torque and the amount of power that is coming out of the engine. But additionally, the alignment on this car is very off. I need to get my car aligned desperately. So that's gonna be going to the shop tomorrow, and we're gonna get this laser aligned and get it dialed in the way it needs to be, which will hopefully help with that torque steer a lot. Everything I read online says that alignment has a huge impact on torque steer. So fingers crossed. Now, I was really hoping that in this video, I would be able to bring you guys to the dyno and get some power figures and, really get this thing dialed in and running the way it needs to. But unfortunately, with Christmas, the end of the year, I was not able to get into the dyno, get into that schedule. There's one single shop here in North Carolina that is going to be able to help me out here. And I had to get on his schedule, which is in the early portion of next year. So I will be doing a lot of little tweaks and fiddling and carb tuning and all that kind of stuff on the side, which I'm not gonna bring you guys along with the video or anything, but if you wanna see little updates, head over to my Instagram and follow me there. I usually post stories there. But he is going to help me get that on a dyno and get the final tuning and fueling and all that stuff kind of dialed in, and hopefully get some pretty cool power figures on this. My target is around 150 horsepower. We'll see what we can do. I think it's probably close to that already based solely on the butt dyno. But I think that there's probably a little bit more room on top of that with some extra boost, but not comfortable with that just yet. Now, if you guys have any questions about this or any questions about this build, feel free to post them in the comment section below. This is not the end of this turbo build. There's lots more to come with this and lots more tweaking and some really, I'm gonna bring this up to the mountains and do some driving to show you guys what it's like with the anti-roll bars and to give you guys a review of those. I also am installing a new set of ProTech shocks on this car, which I'm gonna review for you guys. But it's gonna be a good new year. And I'm sure there's going to be some variations of the engine that are going to get tweaked and changed, and you know how this thing goes. There's always a little something that you want to do differently, change and try out, etc. But I really hope you guys have a wonderful New Year's, a wonderful Christmas if that's something that you celebrate, and you guys know the drill. Until I see you again, enjoy those minis and motor on.